Maybe you've been a part of a worship ministry for a while now, but you're starting to maybe feel like there's something more, like God has called you to worship ministry. And when I say calling, I mean like a divine design and purpose to use the vehicle of music to shepherd people within the church or for the church. You might be asking this because you're currently not leading a worship ministry, but you can't shake this feeling that you're supposed to. Or maybe you are leading a worship ministry right now and it's really hard and you're wondering, did I miss it? Was I supposed to do this? And I'm not sure that there is like a really simple, easy, step-by-step way to figure this out, like taking an Enneagram test or anything like that. But I figured I would share my story and maybe that'll help you. Hi, I'm Dave Dolphin at practicalworshipblog.com, sharing ideas, tips, and practical advice for the worship leader that has to do it all. If you're trying to figure out how to do all the little extra things that come with leading a worship ministry, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell right next to it, and we'll be here to help every single week. So I remember when I was in college, there was this verse that I felt like God gave me that was Colossians 3:16 and 17, which says, "Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly with all wisdom, singing songs and hymns and spiritual songs, singing with thankfulness in your hearts. And whatever you do, in word or deed, do so in the name of the Lord." And what I took from that was that the purpose that God had for my life was teaching and admonishing other people through the vehicle of music, sharing the love of Jesus through songs and hymns and spiritual songs. So my first interpretation of that, what I felt like I was supposed to do, was I needed to be an artist. I needed to make a tape, because it's the mid-90s, make a tape of original songs and try to book concerts and things like that. But the problem was, I was really bad at it, like cringy, really bad at it. And then after college, you get married and you have kids, and these other day jobs would just kind of start to creep in, and the artist thing kind of fizzled away. But I would still play drums or run sound for other bands that would travel out, or I played drums on my church worship team, and even some of the day jobs that I had involved music to some degree. But one day I found myself leading worship at the church that I went to. Not that I was on staff, but just, the church that I went to. And that one time turned into another time, which turned into a third time. And eventually I found myself leading worship at this church 10 or 15 Sundays out of the year. And I started to feel this tug. And I had to kind of make the decision, is this a hobby or is this a calling? And so I started talking to some of the other pastors that were on staff at this church. Just what did that call look like in their life? Not that I expected God to call everyone the same exact way, but I was looking for like trends. I was looking for commonalities, something that I could look at in their life that maybe was in all of theirs that I was starting to see in my own life. I eventually made it to the senior pastor, and I talked with him, and I'd known him for a good 10 or 15 years or so, and just kind of explaining all the different things. And he said, well, like when you prepare to lead worship, tell me about that. And so I told him about how I would pick through the songs and how I would work up the band, the time I would spend there, and how I would pray over the run sheet. And, even the fact that I had this blog, and before YouTube, it was a blog, and, all these different things about leading worship. And he just kind of leaned back in his chair and he smiled and he goes, yeah, normal people don't do that. I remember going home that night and talking to my wife and sharing all this, and I just said that we needed to surrender to the call. And she's like, well, what does that entail? What does that mean? It's like, I think it's just recognizing that it's there and waiting for your marching orders. And I knew that could be a week, it could be months, it could be years. I was ready. Now, as it turned out, I was talking to a church within a month, and 3 months later from that, I was on staff. Now, that's where the Disney movie would probably say, and they lived happily ever after. That wasn't the truth. There's a lot of great moments and a lot of great people that happened at that first church, but it was not easy. I helped the church work through transition with senior leadership, and then when the new leader got there, eventually got pushed out. And after being at a place for 5 years, and there's church hurt that goes with all of that, you find yourself in a position where you're having to look for something else and asking the question, am I still a worship pastor? Advice that I've given other people is that if you can do anything else, if your heart will allow you to do anything outside of the church, then go do that. And I had to take that advice myself because I had other opportunities with Hobby Lobby and like a graphic design firm. But I was also talking to the church that I'm at now, and I had to decide, am I still a worship pastor? And after praying through it and all that, I decided, yeah, this is what I'm supposed to do. We're trying to work through like whether you're called or something. I mean, obviously that's in a very spiritual realm, and God's going to speak to you through reading His Word. He's going to speak to you as you pray and things like that. So it can be kind of a hard thing to quantify, like from a practical sense. How do you know that you're called? But I do think there's three things that are kind of an outward expression of what God is doing in your heart. The first is there fruit in what you're doing? Like specifically, you're talking about being called to being a worship pastor. When you lead worship, is there fruit? And only you really can quantify that, but just look around and see, when you lead worship, does God bless that? Is there fruit that comes from that? Two, you're just gonna have a heightened sense for the needs that come out of whatever ministry that you're being called to. Again, if it's worship ministry, you're just gonna have a heightened sense. You're gonna care about just the needs of worship ministry and the blessings of worship ministry than the average person. And so just like if you were called to be an evangelist, you're gonna have a higher sense of just sharing the gospel. Everyone, we're all supposed to share the gospel, but if you've got that calling in your life, then it's just, you're gonna eat, breathe, sleep it. And three, there's just gonna be this feeling that you can't shake. If this is an idea that you've conjured up, then those feelings kind of come and go. But at least in my life, what I've discovered is that there's just this constant feeling that God speaks in this very gracious, constant, nagging tone. So what's your story? What did it look like for you when God called you to worship ministry? Or what things are you seeing in your life right now that make you think that God is calling you for the first time into ministry, whether it be worship ministry or anything else? Put that in the comments below and let's have the conversation down there.